We have a Q&A with Maria Zink and CEO Ted May and Steve Brown, Northeast Account Manager. I just want to thank you all for coming on and want to say congratulations on just a phenomenal episode and a great deal of appreciation to you for helping us put this project together.
Justin, thank you. This was a great deal of fun. It was wonderful to work with you and the rest of the team from Beyond Clean. And I particularly want to thank you on behalf of our employees who have not had a chance to really have their stories told. So thanks again. I'd also like to thank the guests that came out. You know, we've got a lot of customers that have been very loyal to us over the years, and it was wonderful to have a couple come out and really be able to see behind the scenes what we do here.
Yeah, it was great to have them come along for the ride. And Leonidas' story, I'm glad we featured him, because really your culture, and Bob said it best, and we've teased him, but it's become an immense tagline in the background for Beyond Clean. But when he said, it really feels like we're talking about a family, we're not talking about a company. You really made us feel like we were part of the family when we were there, and allowing us to be able to speak with your team. Again, please let them know how grateful we were for letting us intrude on their daily lives for a few days in a row, and really helping us put together a great program for everyone tonight.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for all the energy that you and the rest of the team have put into this.
It's our pleasure. I'm glad we're finally here. Why don't we get into some of the question and answers? Bob, if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so here is the first one. Here we go. I thought hospitals were moving away from ethylene oxide. Why would a hospital consider bringing it back?
That's a good question.
FDA, I mean, I wasn't here in 2015, but Ted and Maria was. And if you remember the CRE outbreak for ERCP procedures, we use it now for training for new employees, new sales reps and account managers. The FDA came out and recommended 4 supplemental measures for eradication of CRE in hospitals. ETO was one of the 4 measures that they recommended, and it was the only chemical sterilant recommended. And any hospital that used ETO for CRE completely eradicated that from their system.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't realize that ethylene oxide is one of the most compatible methods of sterilization. There's a reason why over 50% of new medical devices are sterilized with ethylene oxide.
Yeah, a lot of people like to say that ethylene oxide was obsolete, and events of 2015 kind of changed that. And if you look at the post-market surveillance, the field testing of endoscopes that has taken place since 2015, ethylene oxide has still been shown to be the most effective way of getting rid of all the organisms on these instruments.
Yeah, and continuing with that, it's the most delicate. It doesn't oxidize. Your items, they don't get damaged when you sterilize with ETO. So your scopes don't get hurt. Anything that you put in that system comes out like it's brand new.
And touching on scopes, is ethylene oxide is the only sterilant that can penetrate long and narrow lumens, as well as those very complex devices.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about lumens. That's a big one, I think. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, lumens are huge. I just wanted to throw out there too that we always talk about ethylene oxide, and you know, here recently we've been talking about monitoring low temperature sterilants and chemicals, and it's ironic that we measure ETO and it's required to measure at 1 part per million, but also we don't talk about the need or that same level of stringent regulation being applied to hydrogen peroxide. H2O2, it is the exact same measurement that the government consider dangerous at 1 part per million, but we don't talk about it.
Bob, it's a really good question, and we have fun with that fact. In that, at trade shows and conferences, we will challenge people, and sometimes we have little prizes we'll give out, where we ask people about the comparative toxicity of ethylene oxide to hydrogen peroxide or peracetic acid, and almost everybody is very surprised to learn that the OSHA standards for all three chemicals are effectively identical.
Yeah, and a lot of times they may not believe us, and we're like, well, OSHA and NIOSH have really good websites to find that information too.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny because I know Bob does a presentation on chemical monitoring and actually presented it at our conference last week, our virtual conference. But what you're talking about tees up the next question that's sitting here isn't ethylene oxide more dangerous than other sterilization systems? I thought this one was a good one. It's kind of right on this train of thought you're discussing now.
That is a good question. And I would love to say that we've never heard it before, but it's actually quite common. And truly, any type of chemical that's used as a powerful antimicrobial agent, is going to be dangerous. And so you have to use it correctly the same way you would with any other sterilant in your SPD.
That's a great point. They're all designed to kill microorganisms, so they are by definition dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. We don't try to say that you shouldn't be careful with ethylene oxide. We try to emphasize the fact that you need to exercise the same level of caution, and the points you made, Bob, the same level of exposure testing with all of these methods. Ethylene oxide is not unique that way.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of what we were trying to do with this concept was highlight culture, and meeting Dr. Andersen was phenomenal. And this next question is asking about him. And I guess I should tell everybody we filmed last September. So it hasn't even been 12 months since we were all together. How has the world changed? But they're asking, it was great seeing him. Is he still around?
Very much. Dr. Andersen is 89. He founded the companies over 60 years ago. And he is here at the plant every single day of the week. They built people tougher back then.
I know Bob's pretty tough, but he's not back then. But he's been through a lot himself, So Bob's the toughest guy on the Beyond Clean team. Maybe we'll put him in a wrestling match sometime. All right. Let's go to the next question. I thought ethylene oxide was going to be banned, and I don't know that I had heard that. Is that something that you field a lot?
We do. It's another common misconception. It is not. It is not going to be banned. There has never been conversation regarding the actual banning of ethylene oxide.
Yeah, beginning in the 90s, CFCs and inert gases were starting to be phased out of these mixtures with ETO. So what happened was a lot of these larger units, these larger sterilizers using large tanks, 50-pound tanks of ETO with very large chambers. You can talk to a lot of people that's been in SPD for a long time, and they'll remember these systems. These systems have been phased out because they got rid of those gases that were basically harmful to the ozone, to where now it's 100% pure ETO.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. In fact, Bob, you brought up in the video the old tank-based systems, the big tanks. They're using a lot of gas. The tanks themselves had to be in ventilated storage. And for a lot of the people watching the video, this is what they think of when they think of an ethylene oxide sterilizer. It's these systems that were designed back in the 70s and 80s, and that were used up through the 90s and the early 2000s. And we like to say this is a little bit like looking at a car from the 50s or 60s, which didn't have seat belts, didn't have headrests, and on the basis of that car saying, you know, I don't think that these car things are very safe. And if somebody said that to you, you'd say, well, you know, look, modern cars have got ABS and anti-lock brakes and you know, all manner of safety devices. And the same thing holds for ethylene oxide sterilizers. You cannot compare a modern 21st century ethylene oxide sterilizer to these systems from, you know, back in the 80s and 90s.
So does that mean we're a Tesla?
I'll take that.
You know, I couldn't agree more with that. I tell everybody I used ethylene oxide my entire career in the hospital. And as long as you do it safely, as long as you have the equipment installed to protect your staff, your fellow coworkers, your general hospital area, it is a perfectly safe and a very, very good sterilant.
Yeah, and we've tried to make it easier to be safe is one of our goals.
All right, the next question, they're getting spunky out there. Are you suggesting that ethylene oxide will replace hydrogen peroxide?
No. Ethylene oxide is just another tool in someone's arsenal against, you know, for infection prevention. It's never going to replace, it's only going to complement other methods of sterilization.
Yeah, H2O2 is great. I mean, it's fast.
It is.
It does its job really well. There are some items, there's some materials that you cannot sterilize with H2O2. So us being a complement to that system is great because we are compatible with pretty much anything. So if you have items, if you have cellulose materials or just items that you're afraid to put in H2O2, that's where we come in.
That's a very good point. The hospitals that have adopted our system are using it alongside hydrogen peroxide. And we get the question a lot, what is the best method of sterilization? And the honest answer is that a modern SPD is a little bit like a professional golfer. You know, they've got a lot of clubs to choose from, and you're going to use the club that's appropriate to where you are on the course. The SPD manager is going to use the technology that's appropriate to the challenge at hand. And ethylene oxide is a really useful tool in the box.
So it looks like we're starting to get the word out, which is good, because this next question says the general public is talking about this. And that was really one of the things that we were really hoping that we would accomplish. And I'll be excited to see the numbers joining us with the event tonight, but then afterwards as well. And I'm hoping that more and more people outside of our industry, you know, we obviously know this information really well. This question coming in now is saying, you know, their friends and family are asking them about how instruments and devices should be cleaned. And I'm just thinking back to Hank in this episode, and he's saying, you know, if they knew, you know, would they ask, are you doing everything that you can? So I guess in the context of this episode and our conversation tonight, they're asking how ethylene oxide would help with this, or what part it plays.
You know, that's an excellent point and a great question. There's a real debate over high-level disinfection and sterilization and devices and what they should be. And the general public, especially right now, is becoming educated. They are going to ask questions, and they're going to want to know what items are used in their procedure and if they were disinfected or if they were sterilized. And with ethylene oxide, again, being one of the most compatible methods of sterilization, I don't see why a hospital wouldn't implement it in their SPD.
Yeah, I mean, you can take items like scopes. You can't sterilize every scope. However, you know, you may need that sterilization system like ETO in your toolbox in your SPD department for those situations for immunocompromised patients. Anything that any person, patient, or procedure where you will need that full terminal sterility for those instruments being used.
Yeah, I think the subject here is endoscopes. And what Steve was saying is that there are so many endoscope procedures in the United States that, given the longer cycle time of ethylene oxide, it's not possible to sterilize every scope for every procedure. And there's a lot of debate right now going on about, is disinfection good enough for endoscope reprocessing? And increasingly, there are a lot of people who are saying no. A lot of the particularly critical scopes need to be sterilized. And we have a very good way of doing that.
Bob, you have anything you want to add there before we get to the next question?
No, I think they handled it well. It's a challenging topic, but it's I just go back to it being, if you use it properly and you have all the tools to go with the autoclave and a baiter to take the vapor and put it out of the building in a safe way, it's a safe product, and it just enhances your department, like they said.
It's interesting. Bob, oh, go right ahead. Yeah, the next question actually says, is it safe for the environment? So go ahead and respond to Bob's comments, because I think that ties right in.
Well, Bob touched on something that Hank had said about informed consent, and the fact that as people become more and more aware of the difference between something that is disinfected and something that is sterilized, I think a lot of people are going to start insisting on, the fact that a sterile instrument is being used on them. And that's something that in years past, people simply weren't aware of that distinction.
We have another one asking about training. What kind of training maybe they say is needed to use the equipment, but I guess I would say not only what training do you, not only what training is required, but what training do you provide? I'm going to add on to that question.
And I love that. And one of the things that I'm most passionate about is training. We love meeting our clients. We love doing on-site training, which is offered for everyone who purchases one of our systems. And as we are all now discovering, the way we communicate and the method we communicate with people is much different now, because we are limited to, we are limited to traveling. We can't go places we did before. So we are working on more advanced training that can be done virtually. And we're super excited about rolling out new things as we work on them over the summer. And I have to say, as part of Andersen, that Steve is one of our best individuals as far as training. He has done on-site training, virtual training, FaceTime training, and he is just phenomenal, as are the other members on our team.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. But just to piggyback on what she said, not to take up more time, but and what Bob said earlier is training is really big. And then also as a part of that training is re-educating people. And like what Bob was saying before, when you train somebody and you educate them on the proper methods, people say, oh, it's not that bad. It's a lot of that fear is taken away when they know they're doing the right thing. And that re-education part of the training is very, very important to what we do.
Yeah, I'll add to that training is really part of the company's DNA. And I say that in that Dr. Andersen is a very accomplished inventor. He's got about 90 patents to his name. One of the things that he insisted on, going back to the early 1970s, was operator training. I mean, today, Joint Commission requires it. It's in all the guidance. Dr. Andersen was insisting on operator training before it became an industry standard. And it's something that we've been doing, as a manufacturer for over 50 years.
I think a very good point to add to that is that OSHA in their OSH Act of 1970 require employers to provide their employees training. So you've got a company with a product who's willing to train, but as an employer, you're required, if you have these dangerous chemicals in your building, to provide training and safety policies and procedures for that chemical.
Bob, it's another great point, and I think a lot of people are aware of that requirement, specifically regarding ethylene oxide. And somehow there's a sense that with other sterilization technologies, it may not be important, but you make a very good point there.
So here's one they're asking me to answer, and I didn't expect to be receiving questions. I thought you would get all the questions. It says, I swear this is from somebody I know. Justin, what was the experience like filming? Weren't you nervous? Being on camera is way different than being on a podcast, I imagine. Yeah, and being on live video is way different than being on a podcast as well, I will say. You got to shake the jitters out, and I will tell you a really funny story. At the very end of a long day of filming on day one, and honestly, maybe we hung out and talked a little too late the night before. It was like 4 or 5 o'clock, and we're trying to record that intro, and sure enough, a plane goes overhead, a car drives by. I mean, everybody's ending their day, so they're all leaving, and we totally forgot to bring the teleprompter. And so I'm just sitting there muddling through, and I think Hank was holding like an iPad or a computer or something and trying to look right at the camera while I was trying to deliver that. I think we spent 45 to 50 minutes there, and you don't see the profanities in the film, but yeah, it was definitely tough. And this was a project that I cared deeply about, that mattered a lot. And as I got to know the Andersen folks, I really wanted to deliver something that you would all be proud of. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what it would look like at the end. We were very much innovating and disrupting our way through this process. The patience that you guys had with that is phenomenal. And yeah, it was definitely nerve-wracking. I found myself dealing with that throughout filming. And in the end, I think, we have a really good product, and maybe hopefully you don't notice.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more, Justin. I always joke and tell everybody that I heard words come out of Justin's mouth that I haven't heard since basic training.
Bob, I'm going to throw this last question at you.
Okay.
Was there anything that you learned about Andersen or ethylene oxide that surprised you, especially since you had so much experience using the technology previously in the industry?
Yeah, I think it at the end of the day, it really reminded me about what an effective sterilant it is, but also, if used properly, how safe it is. I mean, that truly is the message that just rang through the entire tour to me. And I kept watching that, having used it and always being nervous, and testing my employees and having area monitoring, just seeing the safety and the care that goes into manufacturing it was really amazing to me.
Ted, Maria, Steve, we did it. We did it. We're here. I really am very pleased. And Ted, you were really phenomenal. We had you at a conference just a few months after filming, and you did a great job on the panel discussion as well. You're a great host, very composed. You really know the business. And Maria, you've been a believer literally since the beginning. And I just want to thank you, and Steve, everything you did to get things set up at the Eddy Pub so that we could film in that beautiful location right along the Haw River. Please extend our thanks to them as well. And honestly, I just can't thank you enough for helping us make this, a reality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. And when the lockdown is lifted, we're going to have you back to the Eddy and go back to the pub where this started.
Phenomenal. I'm really looking
awesome.
forward to it. I do want to take a moment just to encourage everybody watching that you can visit the websites of Andersen Sterilizers. Andersen is anpro.com, so www.anpro.com. You can also visit our website, www.beyondclean.net. And I'd encourage you to sign up for our weekly newsletter and subscribe to our weekly podcast. And one additional note is that we have developed CE presentations around the themes for the episodes that you are viewing. And those presentations are going to be made available on demand in a webinar format. I did see that question in the chat as well. So there's the answer. That'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks. So be on the lookout for details around that. As you know, we care deeply about educating and providing CE credits here at Beyond Clean. And